Hi, today we're going to talk about HTML forms. An HTML form is a section of a document containing normal markup special elements called controls. And this include checkboxes, menus, radio buttons, etc. and labels on those controls. And these forms are used to add another level of interactivity to your web page. And at the same time, it allows you to communicate, or it allows the users to communicate with the website. And it is a tool that helps you gather information from a user, and then it also helps in various navigations. And generally, these forms are used in conjunction with the service-side scripts such as CGI, meaning Common Gateway Interface, and PHP and ASP scripts. Now, when a web browser takes information, it wraps it and packages it in a format that can be sent directly to a web server. And now this is what happens when we use forms. Now, the program can unpack the information and manipulate it on the other side, and then store the data or send feedback back to the user through the browser. Now, forms are very important because they would help users send their information to the server, and the server would in turn return their requests. Now, forms have three parts. Now we have form tags, and then the second is the actual form elements, and then the third one is the submit tag, which creates the button that sends all the collected information to the server. So what happens now, we're going to use some form tags, and then we will see some of the form elements that are used, and then how they present the areas for users to input information. And then finally, a button is always used with forms to help send information to the server. Now, amongst the form elements used, we have what we call as the input element. The input element is one of the most common control elements that we use on forms. Now, before you even start using these elements, you must make sure that all your information is right inside the form tag. And this one, it defines an interactive form, which is a web page form. And then these are the control elements which are contained for this form. We can have input, select, option, text area, button, label, legend, field set. Just maybe to mention one or two input, you might have an option of stating what input control you want to have in your form. And then text area, it can give you some area where you can type information. Option, you can have some radio buttons there, at least options given to a user. And then button, it can display a button. Labels, it will give a name to either control or just give a label to something. And then some options can group together, and then at the same time we can have a field set here, and then the legend can also help us identify this field set. So these are some of the elements that are used. And then we can also know that forms elements act as container for controls. So all the controls are just put together and they help work together. Now, these controls or these elements are all together, they help in forming the layout of a form. And then at the same time, we are going to use very important methods that are going to help us to send information to the server. Now, attributes of form elements are very important. Number one of the most common or most used element is the method. Form element is the method. The method it will specify which HTTP method will be used to submit the form dataset. Now, method is quite important because it defines what or how the information is going to go from one point, let's say the user point, to the server, and from the server to the user. So the method attribute is one of the most important form element. And then action, it specifies and tells us where the information is going to be sent to. So it specifies the URL of the script that the form should be sent to. A good example is just right here. We see that the form action mailed to this person, yahoo.com, blah blah blah. So the method that is used here is post. So it means that the action is that the information in the form that has been captured is going to be sent to this mail. So ENC type or encoding types, it specifies how your form data or the information that is already captured by the form is going to be encoded as it's going to be submitted to the server. And I will go to accept character set. It specifies the character encoding for the input data. So if, for example, you have seen something accept character set unknown, they know that that's the default value considered as a character encoding used to transmit the document containing form. Now, targets where to open the linked data or the linked document. Now, in this case, for example, you want to receive information or your document in a new page, in a new window, or in the same window as you have been working on. So target will help us come along, or will help us specify what's going to happen or where your information is going to be opened. Now it's used with frames. Frames they were used to divide our web page into sections, and based on the sections you can have information being displayed in some of the sections, those which are called frames. So it's very also useful. And then as we move on, the name is also very important. It names the element so that it may be referred to from style sheets or scripts. So name is very important. Now when you get to CSS, you see you can easily point out to your elements that you want to manipulate or to style up. So if you give it a name, it's going to be very easy for you to get it and work on it or modify it. And then what I want to say here is input elements is one of the most important elements that we are going to see or that works with websites, because it is the one that enables us to really define what type of input element you want. This is one of the most useful tags used in form container, which is an empty element. It generates buttons, input field, checkboxes, name it. So many other types of let me call them tools or controls are going to be placed on the form because of this input element. So it inputs areas in a form and defines a form control used to enter input. Now, this input tag would have lots of attributes, and you will choose one or few of these, and one of them is name. We've said that sometimes it's good to assign your control a name, so it assigns the control name, and then value, it helps us to set the values to go to some controls. A good example is, for example, you can decide to have an initial value set for something. For example, if you had a section for date, and you know automatically that the date that is supposed to be there, you can say initial value is that, so nobody would be bothered about trying to set up a date, because some date will show there, so they can modify it or use it. So set initial value in some area. Then the size, for example, in this case, we will look in one of our examples. So size is going to help us to set the horizontal space of the area, and then the max length, we can set the maximum size of the characters allowed in an area. And then number 5, checked, you can decide either to initially check a reader box or a checkbox, depending on what you really want to work on. So these are some of the attributes which are very important, and they're used with the input tag. There's so many source, with the source of an image or something like that. Alt, you can have some alternative text for an image. I mentioned this in a very fast lecture when we're trying to get some photos. You can have some text that would describe the photo, etc. So there are lots and lots of other attributes that you can come up with when you're using the input tag. Now that is very important. Now type also is very important because it helps us specify the type of control that is going to be used on our form. Now, for example, what you see here, you can see that the input type is, for example, this attribute is text. It means that we're going to have text, and then the text area is going to come up, and then you're going to be able to pass information. If it's password, then it knows that this text that is going to be passed here must be hidden, or it must have some special character that would prevent people from seeing what is happening. So type is very important. This type specifies the type of control to create the default value for this attribute. For example, is text, and it defines the type of form control. It says that it has the following values. These are the values: text, password, blah blah blah. That's very, very important. Now we are hoping that we are in the next illustration we will see how we can use some of this.